Hi everyone, delonewolf here. Welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to news for EVE Online, well, some stuff is happening, so that's good. First of all, of course, we have a new event that's happening focused around the rogue drones. If I'm not mistaken, you can always find that on the agency as well. I haven't done a lot of it. There is a huge amount of competition for these sites at the moment. I managed to do one completely on my own. Everything else just is contested or has been started before me. Not easy, especially for like new players, alpha players, because alpha clone players, because I was clearly struggling. I was using the Amar drone destroyer Tech 1 in order to try and run the site. Managed to do it, but that final one, that overseer, did get me to like 25% armor or something like that. So not an easy site, and especially since apparently now the Jackdaw, even the Tech 2 destroyers are not destroyers for this gate, so you have to go Tech 1 or faction, and that is it. So it's quite challenging, but it's also very rewarding. My first site, 80 million, so it was pretty interesting. We'll see how much more time I can put into it. Feels like it is gonna be pretty rewarding though, if you can find those sites. Next bit of news that I want to share is that CCP announced it. You may see it on the launcher as well. There's going to be another mass test next week, focusing around performance for the clients, Mac and for Windows. So it could be a pretty interesting one to take a look at. I'm definitely going to try and make it myself. And then other than that, for the active development, what to expect for this quadrant, for Gateway, and for the final quadrant for this year, don't really have any news there. We did get the Caldari trailer. I think we got it a little bit before, but it was made completely public. I felt like it was a pretty good trailer. Second spot in my book. The Minmatar one, of course, takes the cake in a league of its own. That one really pumps you up to be a freedom fighter. But nice call to action there in the Caldari one, for family, the state, for your corporation. I felt that one as well, and so I thought it was pretty good as well, with the unique accent as well, a little bit of like Japanese in there, I think. So it was cool. I really liked it. In fact, I would say number 1 Minmatar, 2 Caldari, 3 Galente, and then in 4th place the Amar. So yeah, not really sure. I felt like that one fell a little bit short. Didn't really feel like it was too intense or anything like that, but nice to see. And this is also going to be like the final part, I think, yeah, since we're in Gateway, of celebrating the 4 empires in EVE Online. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the New Eden store, see what's happening here. And we've got a couple of new skins for the Sisters of Eve ship, so Astero, Stradios, and then there's probably gonna be one as well for the battleship. Looks pretty good, although I'm not a big fan of purple myself, and I think it's tied to the event. There's definitely skins that you can get from running the drone sites and things like that as well. And then let's so not spotting any sales. No, the rest of it is mostly focused around bundles. And then for services, nothing special to report here either. That means that we get to move on to the market. And we start, as always, with some plex and stuff coming in at 350. Let's get started. Here is a plex, and you may have seen that on the ticker as well. A little bit of a purse pressure, almost 2.8 million for the sellers, but the interesting bit is above 2.7 million for the buyers as well. That is a very narrow margin. You can see the 5-day moving average still going up here, and basically we are matching previous 1-year high points between 2.7 and 2.8 million for the averages. A breakout since the summer where we had 2 tests of going above 2.7 million. The market said no every single time, and this is really the question at this point. I think we could go 2 ways because of all of that pressure from these buyers that have pushed up above 2.7 million. This could be enough to push us to even higher prices, but you can also clearly see, look at how long I have to browse here before we reach 2.8 million on the sellers. These high prices are bringing in, I think, a lot of new supply, but also a lot of traders that are gonna try to take advantage of their price gains since, let's say, March, April, May, even June. You could have bought Plex way cheaper than now. Taking those profits, I think, is also part of the extra supply, and so we could be in for a stall at this point as well. We'll see what the market decides, but this is a very narrow margin on the upside, and so that's something that we don't see very often. Very strong demand, but supply is also willing to take advantage of close to these 1-year high prices. Then we have the multiple pilot training certificate that's also moving up on the average prices, probably just on the sheer pressure that the Plex market is bringing at the moment. 1.35 billion for the sellers, 1.26 billion for the buyers. Way more normal margin as well. Volumes are quite a little bit lower, but you can also see, we don't need to go through that many more sell orders to get above 1.4 billion. For the sellers here, and that could push us up towards a 1-year high point as well. So basically lagging behind a little bit, but at the moment suffering from all of that Plex pressure. Then we've got the skill extractors, exactly the same as for Plex, of course. 5-day moving average getting to that 1-year high point range as well. Well above 310 million ISK, 317 for the sellers and 306 million for the buyers. That means we're talking like 10 million of margin on something that costs 300 million ISK. That's very, very narrow. Buyers willing to go above 300 million. That's pretty aggressive, showing strong demand. But then supply again, if we browse, we still have over a full page before we get 320 million. So I would say that these are signs that we're seeing increased activity in the game after the summer slump. Demand is picking up, but there's plenty of supplies out there that are ready to take advantage of these higher prices and willing actually to sell at these prices as well. So overall, pretty interesting. I think we are going to see a hesitation at this point in Plex, in skill extractors. Where do we go from there? Well, again, that's gonna depend on who can win out, and probably as well on what CCP may still announce for what's coming for the rest of the year. Will they build up a lot of hype, get more cool trailers, things like that, perhaps even open more avenues? I think opening up to the Epic Store will have done quite a little bit on this push up here as well. So we will see. It's very interesting, but it will depend on a lot of external factors, I think. The impact on the injectors here are the large-scale injectors, and they're doing, well, if you're in the camp that thinks we're going to hesitate now, supply is going to squash this a little bit, then this is what that should look like. We reached 680 million on a couple of days, but then of course people said that's the best price we've had in almost 10 months time, and just a couple of months ago I could have bought this below 600 million ISK. Definitely some profit taking happening right there as we push to 667 million for the sellers, 649 for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin. Buyers pushing up against 650 million ISK. Again, we're seeing that hesitation. I think we're gonna see that in Plex, but after that, I would say it's still up in the air. If these guys continue to be this aggressive and push buy prices above 650, that is probably going to give these guys, the sellers, more room to go up as well, and then we could be on an upwards market. For the same price, of course, demand could drop off a little bit, and then we could be in for lower prices, but not by that much, I don't think, considering how aggressive it's the buyers that are pushing up towards these very high prices for considering the last months last year. Then we get the small scale injectors. I think this is a big enough move that it can't really do anything else, and well, it's doing something slightly different. 5-day moving average actually started moving sideways instead of pulling back after going above 140 million on the chart. I noticed that last week as well, so let's take a quick look at the actual prices. It's 135 million for the sellers, 129 for the buyers. So I'm gonna say that there's gonna be something wrong with this part of the chart here. I think this 130, 135, 140, and I think it should be 130, 135, 140 up here. So I'm gonna say that there is something a little bit wrong with how it calculates that in between one, because this should be just above 135 if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that would make sense if you look at it from like less than 24 hours ago. You were pushing sellers at 136 million, so perhaps no, actually that should not have an impact on the chart. I was thinking that's why small scale injectors keep moving differently. But no, I think it's just a matter of getting that one here, getting that one here. But overall, yeah, that should be, well, again, that's also a weird one. Why is this 140? 140. So here you get 120, 120. So that makes sense, right? 120, 125, 130, 135. But then this should be 140, 145, and 150. There is something wrong here on this part of the chart. Not exactly sure what it is, but we're just above 135, not above 140 for the small scale injectors. A slight bug. I should maybe make a bug report on that. After making this EVE talk. Then we have the daily alpha injectors, and this to me is another sign that lots of players are trying EVE Online at the moment. Activity is increasing as the daily alpha injectors are jumping up way above 45 million very sharply, getting close to a 1-year high point yet again. That should be quite a sign of quite a bit of interest all of a sudden in playing as an alpha character, earning 50 million ISK, getting that alpha injector that you can use once a day, and having that gameplay loop be a part of reality. Now, I would say that alpha clones, if you're trying to do the rogue drone event, you're gonna have a bad time without friends, because it's very hard to do without perfect skills and take 2 fittings, but I think they can train into that. So maybe if they have enough experience, they can do it. But it did feel like it was quite challenging, to be honest. But there's other ways, of course, for alpha clones to earn that ISK in EVE Online at the moment. And yeah, showing very strong competition for the daily alpha injectors. One seller coming in at 47 million, most already at 51. So pushing that gameplay loop above 50 million makes it more challenging, more costly, more time consuming as well. But I also think that supply is going to come in, considering these great prices for daily alpha injectors. And the reason, well, the reason is these guys, buyers pushed up to 44.6 million, very close to basically the high end of the trade range, and as a result we have this very expensive price at the moment for daily alpha injectors. Finally, we've got the hypercores. We'll start with the chart that's actually reaching a high range yet again at 290,000 ISK on the chart. Nice little push up here in September, bit of volume increase, but having this price push up on a slight decrease to me again shows that sure, and there is a bit more activity in the game, a little bit more spamming in GTA 4.4 for the Hypernet relay, and that has pushed prices for hypercores up a little bit. Some supply coming in apparently, as we were pushing 290 on the charts and above, but now sellers are coming in at 285, buyers at 275, and that's really been the story. God, I hope that the neighbors won't make too much noise, but yeah, that's been the story throughout this plex stuff category right here, is that we are seeing very high prices, very strong demand, but supply that is very much willing to come in as well and to bring those prices under control close to these high points. Next up, we've got the mineral markets. Man, do they really have to start working right next to me now? All right, mineral markets coming in at 1320. Like that. Let's get started. Here is titanium, super stable. Honestly, for the Isaac minerals, I don't expect any shocking things to happen here. Around 4.5 ISK, 455 for the sellers. One coming in with 14 units at 447, yeah, 441 for the buyers. Everything settling right around 4.5, and that is just the range for titanium. Same story again. At the moment, you're selling a little bit above 4.5, so there's still room for plenty of good supplies to come in. Eventually that pushes the price down to less than 4.5, but that's when supplies start to stall, and then we see that higher price again. Very narrow margin, very stable. The high-sec mineral market is basically kind of done, found out, unless we really see a massive resurgence, in my opinion, in nullsec for capitals, super capitals, and things like that. I think we are here to stay. Pyrite actually going down below its average. You can see that pulling down well below that 20-day moving average for its 5-day moving average. 1663 for the sellers, 1620 for the buyers. But here again, look at that difference. Just half a page, maybe 6-7 sell orders, although they're pretty big, to 10 million, 50 million, etc. You're going back to 17 decently quickly. And so this is basically the part of the story where all of this supply is keeping prices very low, but it's drying up. There's not another 20, 30 people that are gonna just dump their pyrite well below 17 ISK. So I think just needs a little bit of time to push through those couple hundred millions of pyrite, and then we'll move back towards that average, perhaps even slightly above that, which seems to be around 17 ISK. Then we've got the Mexilon chart, a little bit late when it comes to the stability, right? Titanium finding stability right after May. This one is a little bit later, but that's of course because Mexilon managed to push up to 200 ISK on the industry rush in April. It also had to give back ground. Before that, I would say average price 75-ish for Mexilon, pretty regular, but now we are settling at around 60. I think this is going to be, so let's take a quick look here. Sellers at 59, buyers at 56. Here as well, I think we're like slightly below. Yeah, you can see that 5-day moving average slightly below the 20-day moving average, but this is just the state of mining and minerals in HiSec. It probably doesn't matter that much anymore whether you're mining for mix, for for pyrite, or for titanium. It's just you know, you're gonna get your price, and sometimes you're slightly above that, sometimes slightly below that, but in general it's gonna be okay to just move your minerals to the market, sell them if you need or want the ISK. Then we're moving on to the low-sec minerals. Here is the Isogen chart, and this is obviously starting to feel like a completely different chart. You can see that 20-day moving average is also starting to move well above 60 ISK. At this point, we are talking one seller at 61, but then 64, 64.2, getting up to 65 ISK on the first page, and buyers are up above 60 as well at almost 61 ISK for these. For the Isogen. The problems, well, 37 million units, 28 million units, 46 million units. I've been saying this for a couple of months and even longer, I think, at this point, is that we are still chugging through those old reserves for Isogen, but I would say the market is starting to show signs that we are getting to the end of that process, as our lower points, right, when the dumping happens, all right, better price right here, early August, even a day above 70, dumping happens of those old reserves, we're pushing back below 60, but then the price goes back up, and then we're pushing back, but we don't manage to break 60, just 2 weeks ago we pushed back up towards 80 ISK, and then our pullback is again at a higher range, making that 20-day moving average go up in very impressive steps. I think this is honestly a process that is going to keep happening. I don't see this ending anytime soon. I think that Isogen has to pull up way higher from the Mexilon price towards the Noxium price, since it is a low-sec mineral. But it all, of course, depends on how much more stuff is out there. But I'll be honest, if I were holding a lot of Isogen, I'm holding a moderate amount of Isogen, definitely nothing that can crash the market back down right like this. I'm holding on to that stuff. I'm going to wait for signs that it's just active supply and active demand that is dictating the price, where we're not seeing 50 million, but we're seeing a way more logical progression in volumes from between Mexilon and Noxium. Once I'm seeing that type of supply demand dynamic takeover, that's when I would be starting to sell my Isogen. I think that would be you know, as long as you then don't spook the market with too massive volumes, that's gonna be the best possible price that you can get for it. It'll take some patience, it'll take a little bit of time, but honestly, those that are thinking at the moment, well, I should be dumping now on any opportunity that I get, because in Q4 the end of scarcity is going to start. I honestly don't think the first thing CCP is gonna do is flood the market with extra Isogen. So overall, I think that even in Q4 and even into next year, we could still have this isogen market be very tight, dependent on the low sec and the POGVIN supplies. By the way, someone mentioned that there's a lot of isogen and Noxium available in the triglavian space as well. So let's move on to that Noxium then, that is moving quite nicely within its band, 1000 to 1250. That's its price range, which is actually pretty large, 25% move between that low point and that high point after recovering from the April industry changes. And we're moving in a very nice wavy pattern that's basically doing the same as the high-sec minerals, but of course in a much more meaningful way, with high points that are way higher, low points that are way lower. Also, although that's relative, 1000 disc is still gonna be your most expensive mineral for Tech 1 production. At the moment, we're basically slightly above average, 1150 for the sellers and almost 1100 for the buyers. And then you're all dependent here in this market with also volumes of less than 1 million, 6 million as the big order, and then, you know, sometimes they manage to get just above 1 million units, but these are normal volumes that you could expect from people that have activities in low sec. They're not going to bring in 1 billion units of Noxium all of a sudden, just not feasible. And this means that we are in that supply demand situation where, you know, if you get it, sell it, because this is a, you know, an amazing price actually, historically speaking, for Noxium. Then we got nullsec. Here is Zydrine, very, very stable, no signs of any real moves. In fact, at the tail end, we're moving a little bit below average at 877 for the sellers, 810 for the buyers. And what I'm noticing here right away is that this is a surprisingly large margin for an item that needs to be imported from nullsec, where basically the sellers have complete control and can completely dictate the price. And the fact that a margin like this is opening up, to me, means that there's a lot of supplies coming in, actually more than what the market actually needs at the moment, pushing prices down, but also opening up that margin. So I'm seeing a little bit of perhaps even oversupply for Zydrine. And then we get a mega side right here after that August bump, basically went back down to less than 600 disc and is just not able to break through that. 585 for the sellers, 554 for the buyers. Same story. This is like a 30-ish ISK margin that's very much in line with everything else that we've seen, and even considered, in my opinion, slightly large, since normally you would have sellers be able to dictate the price, and those buyers should push up very, very hard to those sell prices. So I'm saying here that the nullsec ones are very stable, very well supplied, perhaps even slightly oversupplied. And then we've got Morphite. Let's see if there's been more of an impact from CCP's change, which made more Morphite available. I think it's in nullsec. It looks like, well, it has found its new range. Let's see what the sellers and buyers are doing. 65,900 for the sellers, 63,000 is for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin between these two. And very quick settling on a certain price. I think this is the same dynamic that you could expect on changes to Megasite and to Zydrine if CCP did decide to influence or change those in Q4. That is that you're gonna find that new range very, very quickly, since it's the sellers that do, of course, have to bring it in and then decide on that sell price. And so Morphite seems to be right here, and I don't expect that to move very quickly unless, you know, more stuff develops, which I think CCP will do eventually. But this is at least the first good pullback for Morphite. It's all still relative. Again, I've mentioned this before. Back in the days before all of this, I used to actually trade in Morphite, and I managed to buy at a low end below 10,000 disc. That was basically my reference point in order to start buying. And yeah, we're still way off from that. Let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 23.30. like that. I think we'll be able to go a little bit more quickly on this one. Yeah, another sign to me personally that we are seeing the end of the summer slump, activity increasing yet again, is that this broadcast nodes managed to go well above 1.75 million on the chart and is staying there, in fact playing with 1-year high points now, 1.9, almost 2 million for the sellers, 1.75 million for the buyers. Stronger demand. Now this may not be like more players, but definitely more industrial activity in the large ship segments that is starting to drive demand for these advanced PI materials. Then we've got the construction blocks pulling back, refined PI still struggling with a complete lack of demand. I think 7,000 for the sellers, 6,600 for the buyers. And again, these are the buyers, these are the sellers. That is the problem for all of the easy to make PI stuff. Consumer electronics stuck at 6,000 discs. There's not much to say there either. 6.4 for the sellers, 5.6 for the buyers. And again, you can see it's the lack of demand that is crushing us quite heavily. Coolants did a nice pullback. All right, full comeback, 10,000 disc. That's definitely interesting. Almost 10,000 for the sellers, 9.5 for the buyers. Where the hell does all of this demand come from all of a sudden? I'm going to say the Imperium rebuilding, other Nordic regions settling down where it is that they've decided to settle down. That will require quite a bit of a push up in infrastructure, and of course all of those services require quite a bit of fuel, and thus demand has picked up. So if, like me, you now have massive stocks of coolants, mechanical parts and things like that lying around, this could be a good time to look at a sell opportunity. Once you go into other stuff, Protectant solutions back up as well, 210,000 ISK a piece. It's 110 for the sellers, 99 for the buyers. I think here, honestly, we're looking at some market speculation on an implant announcement. We really have no idea what Gateway is doing at the moment. There doesn't seem to be like a main focus or thread that we can say, all right, it's going to focus on this. It's just a gateway to stuff. So that could be the exact right opportunity for CCP to decide on an implant set, to like perhaps fill a gap or something like that. I would say that there's perhaps a little bit of speculation on that. It's been a long time since we actually saw CCP introduce an implant set. You can in fact see that right here on the chart. January last year, October last year. Yeah, it is possible. I think this jump here doesn't have any other rational explanation other than that the market is expecting these prices to go back up. And I would say that an implant announcement could be that. Enriched uranium is tied to fuels, seeing a little bit more demand as well. Not a full recovery. I think historically speaking, this is the hardest one to make. So 12.5, something like that would be my average. 9,000 for the sellers, 9,000 for the buyers though, showing that demand is back. If you've been holding on to this for a long time, you can definitely sell. It's still not a full recovery in my book. Integrity response drones confirming the advanced PI going up, staying well above 175 again, 1.9 for the sellers, 1.8 for the buyers. Very strong demand there. Mechanical parts still not a recovery like coolants, but it is trying. It is trying. Those sellers are back at 7,700, buyers at 7,000, and again a little bit more demand tied to fuels seems to be the case. Then we got nanites, and here shows that perhaps not everyone that's speculating on an implant introduction have the stomach to wait it out, as here we are crushed way back towards the low point below 4,500. It's also possible that there's just so many stocks out there that eventually, if you go for a refined one, you can try to speculate and buy up the price a little bit, but there's plenty waiting to sell back below 5,000 disc, and buyers, they're just not there at 4.3. So if you want to still make that gamble, you can still try to grab some cheap nanites at the moment. Then we've got nano factories. The first one that's doing a counter move went up to 1.1 million, but is now going back down to 800,000 ISK. 900 for the sellers, 800 for the buyers. Must have been a little bit of actually a decent chunk of supply that has crashed this price back down. Still, 900,000 for the sellers is not bad considering the chart, especially since April. So I would still say that perhaps we overreacted a little bit, pushing this up to 1.1 million. We've recovered. As long as we don't crash back to like the 700,000 on average range, I think we're still looking at a confirmation that increased demand is there. We had a little bit of a pullback here as well in organic mortar applicators, but again going below 800,000, and then we're already pushing back up there. 840 for the sellers, 770 for the buyers. Our recursive computing modules still having that very bad chart, staying above 1 million, so that's not bad. 1.2 in fact for the sellers, 1.1 for the buyers. Robotics, finally a move in robotics as well, getting back up above 60,000 ISK, which is still terrible. 100,000 ISK average price for robotics historically speaking, so this is still 40% below that. 62,000 for the sellers, 59 for the buyers. It's just more demand, I think, again because of the preps and the rebuilding in Nalsik that's happening, that is gonna require a lot of fuel. Self-harmonizing power cores, again pulling back a little bit as well, but stalling at 1.5 million quite easily. 1.6 for the sellers, not enough demand here, they're below 1.5, so that's perhaps a little worrying. Sterile conduits though are going back up towards the high range. 1.2 million for the sellers, 1.15 for the buyers. Then Yukomi superconductors, I think this was a request for someone that I add this in. Showing the pressure again after the recovery. It is specialized, so that's not good news for cryoprotectant solutions, by the way, is that for the easy to make stuff like coolants, yeah, supplies can come in very quickly. This takes a little bit of time, but the Yukomi superconductors, it's happening, right? We managed to push back to 80,000 ISK, but now we're back down to 71 for the sellers, 64,000 for the buyers. Yeah, demand just isn't there just yet for PI, and so even these specialized PI materials, also not good news for robotics. Any recovery, I mean, there's plenty of stuff waiting out there to take advantage of those prices. And then finally, wetware mainframes continuing to do decently well, I would say, climbing towards 175, 1.7 million for the sellers, 157 for the buyers. So I would say here, the problem in general for PI is still the same. One, we are lacking in demand. Advanced PI materials has gained that extra demand for construction of larger ships since the industry changes, and we are seeing the first signs of a bit of more activity, more recovery in that, but it's definitely not enough to say that we're gonna see a full recovery or anything like that. Within PI, there's extra demand now for fuels, but I also think that that can settle down decently quickly, and so overall the problem for PI is still the same thing. There's not enough demand. It's very easy to make, it's super passive, and so the actual value of that at the moment is very low. Moving on to the advanced moon materials, that's coming in at 3130 then. We can do that. As always, we start with the carbide type materials. Here is crystalline carbonite staying above 175, so we're still paying a premium for these. 180 for the sellers, 177 for the buyers. Not that much in buyers themselves, but very narrow margin, so expensive carbides still a reality, at least for the first one. Then we have the no, not meta materials, but the titanium carbide for Caldari, also settling nicely around 200 ISK here. 210 for the sellers, 176 for the buyers. Again, not a lot of demand, so we're pushing up a little bit of margin between these two, but overall still considering where we were last year, an expensive carbide material. For Minmatar, it's Fernite carbide that is also moving in this higher range above 150. 178 for the sellers, 163 for the buyers. And then finally we've got the Amar one that is also going for a premium, sometimes touching on 200 ISK, 192 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. So we are definitely declining in volatility. We're not seeing big spikes or anything like that, but compared to the situation before the April industry changes, carbides are still going for a premium, being decently expensive. Then we've got our metamaterials. First of all, photonic for Galente. We had this spike last week that was like coming out of the blue. I think it was the only one that we noticed, so this reaction was definitely to be expected, crushing the price back down very quickly. Still 13.6 for the sellers, 12,300 for the buyers, so a bit more expensive. Obviously, a spike like that does cause slightly higher prices for a while, but considering we're in the next week and we're moving back within the range very quickly, I think it's going to be weathered quite easily. Then we've got non-linear for Caldari, that's moving back up, but basically back up to its normal range, just above 20,000 disc. 21 for the sellers, 20,000 for the buyers. This is really actually very nice, quite surprising. We do have a March spike, so not really tied to the industry changes, but other than that, metamaterials have been like amongst the most stable raw materials that we've had throughout this entire saga of the resource crunch, minerals going crazy, then the industry changes, and so, you know, I think that will have kept Tech 2 quite in check, and also made Tech 2 basically more affordable at the height of the resource crunch. Then we've got the Minmatar one, so plasmonic metamaterials moving back to 20,000 disc, which is again nothing crazy, it's just a higher end of its trade range. 20,000 for the sellers, 18,000 for the buyers. And then for Amar we've got terahertz, that's also up for the week, but doing nothing completely crazy at 17,000 for the sellers and 16,000 for the buyers. Then for the other advanced materials, so carbide's up, paying a premium. Metamaterials to me surprisingly stable, very decently good trade range, and just staying within that quite nicely. Then we get the others, and those were suffering a lot more from just a complete lack of demand. So we've got fermionic condensates that have done a nice recovery at the tail end. They're just above 60,000 disc, which is still not a good price for fermionic condensates. 61 for the sellers, 57 for the buyers. This is just a pullback from a 1-year low point. Next up we've got ferrogel, alright, also moving back up here, but again from a 1-year low point. So it's, you know, I would not say great ferrogel is back or anything like that. We just are starting to run out of supplies. That's interesting. 35,000 for the first seller, 32,000 for the buyers. But I would not be surprised that this gets squashed decently quickly. Then we get fullerite up slightly as well, heading towards 750. Not sure if you guys remember, but you know, during Eve Talk, probably the most of the year before this, 1,000 to 1,250 was basically the trade range for fullerite. Very, very consistently, it almost never dropped below 1,000 disc. So we're still very, very cheap. 740 for the sellers, 700 disc for the buyers. We are moving up though, so this again may be another indication that increased activity is here in EVE Online. Hypersynaptic fibers though, very flat, super close to a 1-year low point, so that's not good. Nanotransistors, bit of a recovery, but after dipping below 4,000 disc. Same story here, like a year ago and more. This was easily moving in a 5,000 to 6,000 disc range if I'm not mistaken, so this is again not good. Phenolic composites, then this one got a little bit of an April boost with the industry changes, so we're still paying a slight premium, but even now at the tail end we're going back down, basically at the same range where we started off last year. Just a lack of demand, yeah. 1,400 for the buyers, almost 1,700 for the sellers. Pressurized oxidizers, so this is one of the new ones. Slight uptrend at the tail end, but we'll need basically a longer chart for this to actually show up. And the main problem for all of these new goods, I would say, is still that, you know, the supply chains are not mature yet. 15,000 for the sellers, 13 for the buyers. Reinforced carbon fiber is something pretty similar, a little bit better here in the supply chain, definitely more competition for that one, with a closer margin as well. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,700 for the buyers. Gonna be interesting. I think we're gonna keep these two. They are, after all, new advanced boom mats. They belong in this in this category, and I think it is going to be interesting to see how this supply chains evolve, how supply demand evolves, and thus if we then eventually also start to see some nice volatility that is tradable. It's not easy to trade in advanced smooth materials, but it is doable. You can get very nice profits out of this one. Then we get ceramic fibers, still trading at a premium, but basically back towards a lower end, yeah, below 400 by quite a little bit. And that is it for these advanced smooth materials. I don't expect this dynamic honestly to change very much until CCP announces something, which I think it is more likely that we'll have announcements around advanced moon materials, stuff like moon mining, perhaps some other variations on that and things like that, than that we get around announcements around the Tick 1 minerals. So if you're feeling gambly, yeah, trying to buy at the low points, which I think there's a couple of them that were definitely, like here, hypersynaptic fibers, very, very low at the moment. It can be done, but yeah, keep in mind you will be dependent on CCP intervening, and well, CCP did also say that they were not planning to touch industry for Tech 2. Doesn't mean that they won't necessarily touch the resources though, so it's gonna be interesting. We're gonna keep a close eye on all of that. Then the Tech 2 ship market at 39.10. Alright, sorry, I'm still making Eve talk, bro. Let's get started. Here is the Basilisk chart. Unfortunately, with all of that stability in metamaterials and that stabilizing premium in the carbides, I honestly think it's a very bad time to be actively trading, so I'm still hunting just for bargains, buying as low as possible, but that's it. I'm not expecting a massive turnaround or anything like that anytime soon. It's also way more stable in nullsec at the moment. Everyone is in a build-up mode. So here we've got the Basilisk that's settling easily 220 to 204. You know, you need to see way lower prices on the buy side to jump in, way better prices on the sell side to be selling Basilisk, in my opinion, for traders, and so this is right where we don't want to be. Then you get the Cerberus, that's also nicely stabilizing just below 230 million. I'd need to buy well below 200 million before I jump in. Yeah, to 18 for the sellers, to 13 for the buyers. Just not gonna happen. Way too narrow margin. And settling somewhere in the middle of the chart. So the Guardian, I think last week, was still in a potentially a buy opportunity because of a lack of demand. Average price is still slowly edging down at below 190. We're talking 191 for the sellers, but buyers gone up above 180. I think you were, no, you were already above that as well. And the bad news is, of course, these average prices indicate that it's very, very difficult to grab a Guardian close to 180 million, which, you know, if I would do anything, that's what I would try to do. Then we get the Hound, that's dropping off back below 25 million is, but yeah, unfortunately, if you don't spike towards 30 million, very difficult to make good trades on this, 27 to 22. You could try to buy, right, 22 million, that's down here somewhere. You could try to buy a couple of Hounds on this downtrend to try and get some cheap ones, but that's really, then I would not expect a massive turnover right away. Ichthyosa for Triglavian bumping up from 600 million ISK. I think availability is better, 644 for the sellers, 617 for the buyers. So this is just going to be a volume bump, a little bit more interesting considering that we were finally getting to 600 million ISK. But hopefully the trend on a landing at this range continues. It would show increased activity, increased availability for Triglavian stuff. The Ishtar is declining to 200 million. That is the low point for the last 8 months or so. That could be interesting for buying as well. 203 for the sellers, 196 for the buyers. So you're able to buy an Ishtar below 200 million ISK. Considering this chart, that is not a bad deal. But again, that's what I would then do. Try to buy one Ishtar, 200 million, be happy with that, and wait for better times to then sell at a big profit. Then we've got the Manticore landing on 25, 26 for the sellers, 23 for the buyers. Yeah, you can buy it below 25 million. perhaps, but who knows, maybe considering the lows that are still going down lower, a better opportunity may be happening later down the line as well. Munin is also showing more signs of pressure, but that need to be well below 180 for the buying, 187 buying, 198 buying. Sorry, that's just not good enough. So we're gonna skip that one for sure. Nemesis dropping off sharply and then stalling at 22.5 million on the chart, just below 25 for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. Not a lot of buyers, same story. Right, you're definitely buying close to the low end of the chart, so trying to grab a couple of cheap Nemesis on this downtrend, definitely not a bad idea, but don't expect to be able to sell at like almost 30 million within the next couple of months. This is more of a longer term investments in my opinion. Onero's stable in the middle of the chart. I don't think we have to go and look too deeply into this one. 192 to 180. Yeah, that's a no for me again. Panther, very stable at 1.25 billion. I think telling the story here as well, despite the CCP intervention pushing the price up to 1.75 billion, very quickly and easily absorbed by the market. And the last month or so, we do have increased activity and everything, but the Tech2 market is basically has been more stable. I think lower prices for Morphite have just helped that, and so this, is just slightly expensive. Of course, that's normal, but very stable, which is not good for us traders. And then the Purifier doing an exception. Okay, first sign, so who knows, perhaps volatility will come back, but we've got a crazy average price of above 45 million as there are none available, and they're coming in at 48 million for the sellers, 26.5 for the buyers. It's not gonna last very long, but if you bought, let's say, below 25 million, you do have a small, I think, sell opportunity for the Purifier. I'm not sure where this comes from. This could, I think, be just market manipulation as well. But our first sign of increased volatility again since basically June, I think. Let's hope that it's the beginning of more of this, because I would love to be doing a little bit more trading within the Tech2 ship market. Then we get the Scimitar. That one is dropping off sharply, so that is probably another buy opportunity. Buying close to 180, that's definitely at the low end of the chart here as well. Can be interesting. And then we get the Widow, which again starting to really stabilize just below 125 billion at the tail end. We're expensive, but decently stable, nothing much to report. And then finally the Zealot, that did go down quite low, 10 days ago, jumps up a little bit, but again, this is not a tradable jump. This is just not enough. 196 for the sellers, 180 for the buyers. Still not a great spot, honestly. So yeah, the Tech2 ship market, that's unfortunately the situation. We're still just hunting for bargains, and that is it. Our first exception to the rule though, the Purifier doing a crazy jump up to above 45 million for the sellers. Let's hope it's a start of something. Then we've got the Tech3 ship market coming in at 45.5. Like that, and yeah, let's see if my story finally has a conclusion. I'm still hoping for this Vapel. That doesn't look like a good estimated price. It goes back up because last week the Confessor was doing really well. Well, it's going down now to 45 million. That's not good news for me. 47 million for the sellers, 43 for the buyers, and supply is actually in the normal range once again for a normal price. So if we'd stayed up here a little bit longer, things could have been good, but I do think that last week we saw that the Confessor had that extra supply that was gonna crash the price. Then we've got the Hecate still stable, all right. That one may be upwards pressure right here. 53 million for the sellers, 48 million for the buyers. And now finally the Hecate is drawing in the supplies as well. That's like a lot of Hecates in the last 24 hours, a full page with quite a few sell orders above 10 and above 20. But that should crash the price back down towards at least 50 million decently quickly. And then the Jackdaw went to 55 and is going back down a little bit as well. So that one should drive in. No, that's not that much supply. It's 50 for the sellers, 47 for the buyers. Not as as expensive as the Hecate. So we still have a little bit of room. I mean, the Confessor has normalized, I would say, but the Hecate is drawing in a lot of demand, being the most expensive, supply, excuse me, being the most expensive. The Jackdaw should still see more supply coming in there as well. All of this should be less supply for this vehicle and eventually a higher price. Let's see what's happening. Nope, still not. Slightly higher price. 5-day moving average has edged above the 20-day moving average, but we're still at less than 45 million for the sellers, less than 41 million for the buyers. There's no demand. Supply wise, I mean, it's normal. It's only 3 sell orders. It's really not that much, but despite all of the action here with supplies going massively towards these more expensive Tech 3 Cruiser, this vehicle just is not moving. It must be too niche at the moment, volumes too small to really move that price up. It's interesting. It's not what I expected. I thought on all of this right here, all of this right here, and all of this right here, that we would see a move in this vehicle, and yet that's still absolutely not the case. Then we've got the cruisers. Here is the Legion. The 180 to 200 million price band seems to be just the ticket. Since the change to the skill point loss, that's now gone for these ships. 186 to 178, pretty narrow margin. Definitely doable, I would say. Loki has moved within that range as well. Sometimes breaks out from that, but 180 to 200 million seems to be the ticket here again as well. 190 to 181. Then we get the Proteus. That's the least popular one, so slightly less expensive. Sometimes above 180, sometimes below. Currently 180 for the sellers, 168 for the buyers. And then the Tengu is in a 180 to 200 million, is actually becoming like close to the more expensive one at 200 million for the sellers, 180 for the buyers, which I think is kind of normal as well. If Nullsec is stabilizing and you're looking at more ratting and things like that, Tengu is just an absolute PvE beast with amazing shields, with the missiles. It's just a great PvE platform. I think that'll have more interest at the moment than, let's say, Legions that are quite often fielded in big PvP fleets and things like that. So the Tengu has sort of taken over as the more popular platform and the more expensive one. But all of them, I would say, are now in a similar range between 180 and 200 million in general. And then finally, let's move on to the extra product at 50 minutes. It's gas, of course. As I have taken a look at those in the last video in Amar, massive margins between sellers and buyers. I'm really curious to see what's happening for gas materials here, gas cloud materials here in Jita. We'll start with the fullerenes, take a quick look at these. Fullerite C28, violent upswing towards 1 year high point at 12,800. Massive in September right here, so definitely massively increased interest after the summer slump, you could say, but it is on a lack of supply. 30,000 for the sellers, 11,000 for the buyers. That's just as big a margin, I would say, as in Amar. Very interesting. C32, massive run up as well here in September, 22,500, 23,000 for the sellers, but 22,000 for the buyers. So the fact that this is already a first one where I'm going to say that was my expectation in Jita, a lot more competition and way more volatile demand that's able to push up to these prices very quickly. So close to 1 year high prices, and buyers have already followed suit for C32. C320, we're definitely at a high point in September as well at 50,000 ISK, falling back down a little bit. 50,000 for the sellers, 43 for the buyers. I think that's way smaller a margin between sellers and buyers than in Jita. Then in Amar, excuse me. Then we got C50, also high point here in September, just seems to be the case. And then the margin, way smaller, look at that, 7,890, 7,900 for the sellers, 7,300 for the buyers. That's very interesting, because if you can snag some of those cheap ones in Amar at the right time during a run-up, you're looking at massive profits for your transportation, which will take a lot of time, of course, from Amar to Jita. 65,000 for the sellers, 56 for the buyers. decently expensive, not completely crazy, but definitely a way more normal margin. Another run up here in C60 above 3k in September with 3.5, 3.7 for the sellers, 3.4 for the buyers. That's such a big difference. C70 next, another September run up. That's just the case in the full arenas, and buyers are up above 5,000 at this point. And way more buyers than sellers. Full right C72 kind of confirming, yep, exact trend, 13,500 to 12,500. C84, 82, 8,000 for the buyers. And is that another September run up? Yes. So very easier to tell story, I want to say, here in the full arenas in JITA. There's just stronger demand and buyers have gone up in price together with those sellers with high points at the moment in September. Very expensive gas mining in Wormhole space. I think that's where most of these full arenas come from, is pretty damn profitable at the moment. Then we get the booster gas clouds, where we had the Cito. That was not really that good price-wise, because it hasn't changed that much after the industry changes. And then the Miko was always the one that did have massive increases in prices, but we still saw across the board very big margins between those sellers and buyers in MR. So here Amber Cito kind of confirming that, yeah, we're in a depressed price at the moment, actually below average from the entire year. 78,000 for the sellers, 61,000 to the buyers. That's still a pretty big margin, so there's definitely less interest in the Cito, I'm gonna say, than in the Miko. And here is then the Miko. You can clearly see that change in April to those massive volumes. Used to be worth, well, let's say nothing. It's not even visible on this chart, but 4,000 ISK. Another run up in September, and we are talking about 59,000 for the sellers, but 58,000 for the buyers. That's nothing of a margin. In MR, I think you can buy this for almost half the price, or they're trying to buy for half the price. So that's crazy. That is a massive difference. Then Azure stuck at 50k, which is its normal price, 53 for the sellers. No demand, and yet 39,000 for the buyers. Very narrow margin again compared to MR. Azure went up to 25,000, so that is its new range. 26,000 for the sellers, 21,000 for the buyers. A little bit less of a close margin there, but I think it's still going to be bigger than in MR. Next one here, back down below 110,000 ISK. Not a lot of demand, but again, 10,000 ISK margin between sellers and buyers on this low demand is you know, completely different from MR. And then the Miko, Celadon Miko Saracen, again with a September run-up, showing that increased industry, increased demand for all of these goods, with almost 70,000 for the sellers, 64 for the buyers. Very narrow margin. So I think unless we see something special on the chart, well, Golden Cito actually going up here at the tail end in September, and that's on a lack of supply, all right, which actually opens up a bit of margin between sellers and buyers. And then Golden Miko, very strong competition, 42 for the sellers, 39 for the buyers, and a September run-up with actually a one-year high point not that long ago. Lime Cito coming back down a little bit, not sure. So that should be, yeah, a bit more margin, 125 to 90. And then Line Miko, a run-up that's way more sustainable, 50 in September, and that's because we got 66,000 and 59,000 for the buyers. So the story kind of confirms itself. Cito crawling out of a one-year low point here, and then we get Miko. All right, for Malachite it's a little bit different. That one is struggling just a little bit. 52,000 though for the sellers, 48 for the buyers, is a very narrow margin compared to what we saw in the MR. Vermilion Cito, all right, and then the Miko, let's see here, bit of a bump. So not all of them are like at one-year high points, but the increased demand, I think, should be pretty clear on this one. Again, August, September, nice run up. 57 for the sellers, 53 for the buyers. That's a pretty narrow margin yet again. So good times for gas miners, I would say, at the moment. But selling in JITA does obviously have a quite significant advantage. And that is going to be it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.